Friends, I'm Dr. Amdekar, and as mentioned in the last video, we are starting now with a phase 2 contents of our YouTube channel, and that is clinical analysis, diagnosis and management. Before we embark on such a discussion in neurology cases, I thought it's important to revise the functional anatomy of the brain because a particular symptom can relate to a particular site in the brain, and that is important to understand the functional concepts of different areas of brain. We all know that the cortex has a frontal lobe which is responsible for cognition, the motor system, and also the productive speech, language, and then the parietal lobe for sensory system including visual cortex, the temporal lobe for auditory function, and the occipital lobe for vision. However, it's not always that there is one site and one response because the brain functions with very interdependent distributive network of neurons, and some of the complex functions are therefore mediated through multiple neurons interdependently. And this is important for us to understand that the modern concept of brain function suggests that the brain is organized in an hierarchical ways, which means that the lower order areas are generally due to affection of a single site, like say a sensory system or an MCA infarct producing a dense hemiplegia. But the brain functions with multiple interdependent neurons, and that's why the higher order areas which subserve the complex functions have multiple sites involved at the same time. And this is important. For example, a classical example is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible with such interdependent neuronal network, responsible for emotion, for example, moods, behavior, and also many other vital functions. Having said this, we move to a subcortical area, and we must know that it contains not only thalamus and the basal ganglia, but also the limbic system, which includes the hypothalamus, hippocampus, amygdala, and cingulate cortex, and so on and so forth. This again serves a very complex functions interdependently, like again the major thinking process, attention, decision making, emotions, and also responsible for sleep, appetite, and many such body functions. So it is important that a neurological problem may come with a single symptom, but it may be that the other areas involved are hidden so far, and therefore we need to get the details of history and also examine thoroughly to be sure that not multiple areas of brain are involved, as happens typically in say a cerebral palsy or a neurodegenerative or neurometabolic disorders where multiple areas of the brain are involved, though the onset may be through one area. Moving on from subcortical area to the cerebellum, for example, we know that cerebellum is the site of our balance, body movements, and also fine tunes these movements for a very smooth action. And it is also responsible for emotions, behavior, the thinking process, and also a skillful memory. Friends, a skillful memory comes from cerebellum because once you learn to ride a bicycle or a swim or even play a musical instrument, you can almost remember it forever, even when you have not practiced it for a long time in between. So cerebellum is also involved in multiple functions. Coming down to brainstem, we all know that it serves an important functions of survival, respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, and more importantly, consciousness. And friends, when you see an unconscious patient, you decide which area is involved. Is it bilateral cortical involvement or a brainstem involvement? By the reflex arcs, like a doll's eye reflex, for example, which differentiate these two sides, and also other reflex arcs like a pupillary reflex or even a gag reflex. So it serves a multiple functions. Coming down further to spinal cord, we know that the spinal cord has both the white matter and gray matter, and its function is when you have a receptor which is taking a message through sensory neuron to the spinal cord, where it's integrated and further passed on to motor neuron for an effector action, either a muscle or a gland. And this kind of a system works between a sensory input and a motor output. But this could be monosynaptical, which means that there is no area in between sensory and motor neuron, like say taking a deep tendon reflex, where you stimulate the tendon and immediately there is a motor response. But many times there could be a polysynaptic responses, which means that it goes through several neurons, as happens typically when you touch something which is very hot or painful, you suddenly withdraw, and this is a complex function and through the polysynaptic arc. But when it comes to spinal cord, we also must know the micturition reflex arc, and we are all aware that a stretching of the bladder wall, the detrusor, will send a message through sensory system, ultimately going up to the higher center in the pons, which is directly under the control of the cortex, and then through a motor response, the action will come out. However, it's not only the sympathetic nerve, which is filling nerve, and the parasympathetic nerve, which helps in avoiding, that there is also a somatic nerve which controls the external urinary sphincter, and therefore even if you get an urge to pass urine, to some extent the voluntary control of external urinary sphincter can hold back the urine for a while. So these are the areas that we must know when we are talking about the functional anatomy of spinal cord. And few important points that I want to discuss and emphasize is, one is the muscle tone. Friends, in the same patient at the same time, you could have all types of muscle tone seen, like a hypotonia, hypertonia, which is spasticity or rigidity, and also dystonia. So when you obviously look at one type of an abnormal tone, you'll have to be very careful to fish out other types of abnormal tone as well, because this kind of thing happens when there are multiple neurons at different areas are involved, and I think that is important about the muscle tone. Friends, if the patient can walk, then a neurological patient must always have an evaluation of a gait, and there you look at the stance phase, the swing phase, and also the stride. What's the distance of between the two strides, the direction of the stride. And I think the best way to pick up early change in the gait is ask the patient to walk and turn around and walk back again, and while turning you can see some minor abnormality. Lastly, a special mention must be made about the neonatal and the postural reflexes. Friend, neonatal reflexes are survival reflexes which are present right at birth and disappear over a few months, whereas the postural reflex come a little later in infancy and disappear at a particular time. And we know that a typical Landos comes at about 3, 4, 5 months of age and may disappear even 12 months or 15 months of age. Now, each reflex is important for clinical examination, because that unless one part of a reflex is lost in time, the second action doesn't come. For example, if the palmar grasp is not lost, then you can't have the infant opening up the fists. And similarly, an ATNR has to be lost before the infant can turn over, and STNR has to be lost before the infant can crawl. Of course, crawling is a step that is often in a normal child not even achieved, and straight away a child matures. This is important because the maturity starts from lower down in the spinal cord and go up gradually till about a year of age or around. The cortex get matured, and that's how the urinary control also comes a little later. So these are the important points in the functional anatomy, and I thought I would make a special mention. Well, rest of the details we all know, but some of these points that I mentioned are often ignored or often bypassed, and I thought that is important. Once, to summarize this issue, the important is a patient may present with a single symptom related to a single site of affection, but many other sites are also being involved. They may be in an early stage, and you have to be careful to be sure that every part of the nervous system is normal, and something that will be possible only when you start taking detailed history and clinical examination. Well, friends, now we will start with a neurology cases analysis, and in the next video we will start with our first case. I hope you will join and hope to kind of revise all the necessary issues. Thank you very much.
Don't miss the new case discussion series by the STEER team.